The station floated in the darkness between stars. It was called Vel-9, and it belonged to no one. For thousands of years, the great powers of the galaxy had met here to solve their problems with words instead of weapons. The walls were made of white stone from a dead world, and the ceilings rose so high that clouds sometimes formed inside the great hall. Admiral Park Do-yun stood at the window of his quarters and looked at the stars. He was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short and a face marked by old battles. He had fought in 3 wars and buried too many friends. Now they had made him a diplomat, and he hated every moment of it. Behind him, Ambassador Kim Yuna reviewed her notes on a glowing tablet. She was younger than him by 20 years, but her eyes carried their own weight. She had spent her life trying to make peace between humans and the galaxy. So far, the galaxy had not been interested. "They will try to humiliate us," she said without looking up. "That is their way." Park turned from the window. "I know their way. I have seen it before." The door opened and Lee Tae-ho entered. He was the military strategist assigned to their delegation, a thin man with sharp eyes who saw patterns where others saw chaos. He carried no tablet, no notes. Everything he needed was in his head. "The alien delegates have arrived," Tae-ho said. "High Counselor Mole of the Verith Dominion, Trade Minister Orna of the Select Consortium, Fleet Commander Dren of the Tolos Empire. They brought a fleet of 40 ships. We brought 3. Park smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "They want us to see their strength. They want us to feel small," Yuna corrected. She stood and straightened her formal jacket. "Let us not keep them waiting." The great hall of Vel-9 was designed to make visitors feel like insects. The ceiling disappeared into shadow above them. The table at the center was carved from a single piece of crystal, worth more than some planets. Around it sat representatives of species that had ruled the stars when humans were still living in caves. High Counselor Mole was ancient, even by Verith standards. His skin was the color of dried blood, and his 4 eyes watched everything with cold intelligence. The Verith had been conquering worlds for 10,000 years. To them, humans were children playing at civilization. Trade Minister Orna was smaller, covered in silver scales that caught the light. The Select Consortium controlled trade across half the galaxy. They did not fight wars themselves. They simply bought and sold the weapons that others used to kill each other. Orna smiled constantly, but her smiles meant nothing. Fleet Commander Dren was the largest of them, a mountain of muscle and bone from the Tolos Empire. His people were warriors, bred for battle over countless generations. He looked at Park Do-yun the way a predator looks at prey that does not know it is already dead. The human delegation took their seats across from the aliens. The crystal table hummed with translation technology, turning every language into words that all could understand. High Counselor Mole spoke first. His voice was dry, like wind through dead leaves. "We welcome the human delegation to Vel-9. It is good that you have come to discuss peace. The galaxy grows tired of ... difficulties." Ambassador Yuna inclined her head politely. "The United Terran Republic also desires peace. We believe that cooperation between our peoples can bring prosperity to all." Orna's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. "Prosperity, yes, a lovely word. But let us speak plainly, Ambassador. Your species has caused many problems in recent years. Your ships enter restricted space. Your colonies spread like disease. Your merchants undercut established trade agreements. We have followed all treaties," Yuna replied calmly. "If there have been misunderstandings, we are here to resolve them." Commander Dren laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Misunderstandings. Is that what you call the incident at Riven Station? Your warship fired on a Tolos patrol. After that patrol attacked a civilian transport, Li Taio said quietly. 47 humans died. 12 of them were children. Dren's eyes narrowed. That transport was in Tolo space without permission. Your people were warned. They did not listen. They paid the price. Park Do-yun had been silent until now. He looked at Dren with eyes that had seen death many times. Is that your definition of justice, Commander? Killing children for a navigation error? It is the definition of law, Mole interrupted smoothly. The galaxy has rules. Those who break them face consequences. Perhaps if humanity learned to respect these rules, such tragedies would not occur. The talks continued for hours. The alien delegates presented their demands. Humanity would give up 3 colony worlds near the Verith border. Human trade ships would pay double tariffs to the Select Consortium. The Terran fleet would be reduced by half, and all human military movements would be reported to the Union Council. In return, humanity would receive protection from the Galactic Union. The aliens spoke this word as if it were a gift. Park Do-yun heard it for what it was. Submission. Ambassador Yuna argued each point with patience and skill. She offered compromises. She suggested alternatives. Each time the aliens refused. They did not want negotiation. They wanted surrender. During a break in the talks, Yuna stood at the window of the human delegation's private room. Park joined her. Outside, the alien fleet hung in space like a threat made visible. They are not negotiating, Yuna said softly. They are dictating. Park nodded. They see us as weak. They think we have no choice but to accept. Do we have a choice? Park was silent for a long moment. He thought of the Gyrin massacre 3 years ago. Pirates had attacked a human colony. The Union had ships nearby, but refused to help. 3,000 people died while the galaxy watched and did nothing. He thought of the insults, the sneers, the endless small humiliations that humans faced among the stars. There is always a choice, he said finally. The question is whether we have the courage to make it. Yuna turned to look at him. In her eyes, he saw something he had not seen before. Not despair, not resignation, anger, cold and controlled, but burning nonetheless. When we go back in there, she said, I want you to watch Mole's face. Watch all of them. See how they look at us. Remember it. Why? She smiled, and it was not a diplomatic smile. Because one day we will make them look at us differently. They returned to the table. The aliens presented more demands. The insults continued. Park watched their faces, just as Yuna had asked. He saw contempt. He saw arrogance. He saw creatures who had forgotten what it meant to be challenged, and somewhere deep inside him, a decision began to form. A decision that would change the galaxy forever. The first day of talks ended with nothing resolved. The human delegation returned to their ship in silence. But in that silence, something had changed. They had come to Vel 9 hoping for peace. Now, they were beginning to hope for something else entirely. The second day of talks was worse than the first. The alien delegates arrived late, making the humans wait in the Great Hall, like servants. When they finally took their seats, they did not apologize. They simply continued as if humans did not deserve the courtesy of an explanation. Ambassador Kim Yuna presented a new proposal. Humanity would accept some restrictions on trade in exchange for recognition of their colony rights. It was a fair compromise, one that gave something to everyone. She had spent the entire night preparing it. High Counselor Mole listened without expression. When she finished, he turned to Orna and Dren and spoke in his own language, ignoring the translation system. They laughed. The sound echoed through the vast hall. Ambassador, Mole said finally, your proposal is creative. One might even say ambitious. But I fear you do not understand your position. You are not here to negotiate. You are here to accept what the Union offers. Nothing more. Lee Taiho leaned forward slightly. And if we refuse? Commander Dren bared his teeth in what his species called a smile. Then we will teach you the cost of refusal. Your 3 little ships outside? My fleet could destroy them in minutes. Your colonies? We could burn them in days. Your homeworld? He paused, letting the silence stretch. Well, let us hope it does not come to that. Admiral Park Do-yeon sat very still. His hands rested flat on the crystal table. To anyone watching, he looked calm. Only Yuna, who had known him for years, could see the fury building behind his eyes. The talks continued. Trade Minister Orna spoke at length about the economic realities of the galaxy. Her voice was sweet and reasonable, but her words were poison. She explained how human businesses would fail without access to select trade routes. She described the poverty that would come if humanity did not cooperate. She spoke of human children going hungry, of colonies dying in isolation. We do not wish to harm you, Orna said with her constant smile. We wish only to help you find your proper place in the galaxy. And what place is that? Yuna asked quietly. Orna's scales rippled. A modest one. Your species is young, primitive in many ways. You have certain ... abilities. Physical strength, endurance. You breed quickly. These traits could be useful to the Union. In the proper roles, of course. The proper roles. Park understood what she meant. Soldiers, workers, servants, humanity would become tools for older species to use and discard. As they wished. It was Counselor Mole who delivered the final insult. He had been reviewing a tablet during Orna's speech. Now he set it down and looked at the human delegation with something that might have been pity. I have been reading your history, he said. Fascinating, in a brutal sort of way. So much violence, so much death. You killed each other in such numbers that it is almost impressive. He paused. Do you know what we call your species in Vareth records? The name we gave you when we first discovered your world? No one answered. Mole continued anyway. We called you the Bloody Children, because that is what you are. Children playing with weapons you do not understand, making messes that adults must clean up. He leaned back in his chair. The Gyrin massacre was unfortunate, yes, but perhaps it taught you something about the galaxy. Here, the weak do not survive. The weak serve. And if they will not serve, he spread his 4 hands in a gesture of false regret. Then they disappear? Park Do-yeon's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Is that a threat, Counselor? Mole's 4 eyes fixed on him. It is a fact, Admiral. You have 3 ships. We have thousands. You have a handful of colonies. We have empires spanning hundreds of worlds. Your species has existed for a fraction of our history. You are nothing to us. Less than nothing. The only question is whether you are smart enough to accept this truth or foolish enough to deny it. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to the human delegation. Commander Dren looked eager, hoping they would give him an excuse for violence. Orna watched with cold amusement. Mole simply waited, confident in his power. Ambassador Kim Yuna set down her tablet. The small sound seemed very loud in the quiet hall. She looked at each alien delegate in turn, and when she spoke, her voice was steady. We came here seeking peace. We came with open hands and good intentions. We offered compromise. We asked only for respect. She stood slowly, pushing her chair back from the crystal table. You have given us your answer. Admiral Park Do-yeon rose beside her. He faced the alien delegates, and for the first time, he spoke not as a diplomat, but as a soldier. 60 years ago, your ships found Earth. You looked at us and saw primitives. Children, as you say. You invited us into your union, but never as equals. always as lesser beings to be tolerated and controlled. His voice grew harder. We accepted your insults. We buried our dead when your fleets refused to help them. We swallowed our pride because we believed peace was possible. He paused, letting his words sink in. We were wrong. You do not want peace. You want submission. You want humanity on its knees, grateful for whatever scraps you throw us. Park shook his head slowly. That will never happen. Commander Dren rose to his feet, towering over the humans. You dare threaten the Union? With what? Your pathetic little fleet? Your primitive weapons? Park looked up at him without fear. Not a threat, Commander. A promise. You taught us something at Gyron. You taught us that the galaxy does not reward kindness. It rewards strength. His eyes were cold as the space between stars. So we will show you our strength. Lee Taiho remained seated, his hands moving beneath the table. He sent a single coded message to Earth Command. 2 words that would change everything. Iron Dawn. Yuna turned toward the door. Park followed. Taiho rose last, bowing slightly to the alien delegates with an expression that was almost apologetic. Then he too walked away. Where are you going? Maul demanded. These talks are not finished. Yuna paused at the door. She looked back at the ancient counselor, and there was something in her eyes that made even him hesitate. Not rage, not despair. Something colder. Something patient. Yes, they are, she said. From this moment, the United Terran Republic withdraws from all negotiations. What comes next is no longer in the hands of diplomats. The great doors closed behind the human delegation. In the hall, the alien delegates exchanged glances. Commander Dren laughed first. Let them run. What can one species do against the Union? Orna nodded, her smile unchanged. They will come back. When their colonies begin to starve, when their economy collapses, they will crawl back to this table and accept whatever we offer. But High Counselor Mole did not laugh. He stared at the closed doors with his 4 ancient eyes, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face. Not fear, not yet, but perhaps the first distant whisper of doubt. He had lived for centuries. He had seen species rise and fall. He had crushed rebellions and broken empires. But something in Park Do-yoon's eyes had disturbed him. Something he had not seen in a very long time. The look of someone who has nothing left to lose. He dismissed the thought. The humans were primitive. Violent, yes, but weak. They would see reason soon enough. They would bow like all the others. Mole was very old and very wise. But in that moment, he made the same mistake that so many others had made throughout history. He underestimated humanity. 3 days after the failed talks at Vel 9, every human in the galaxy stopped what they were doing. In colonies scattered across 100 worlds. In ships traveling the dark spaces between stars. On the blue and green surface of Earth itself. Billions of people turned to their screens and listened. President Choi Yoon-ji stood at the podium of the United Terran Parliament. She was 54 years old, a former lawyer who had spent her career fighting for those who could not fight for themselves. Her hair was silver now, pulled back from a face that showed the weight of leadership. Behind her, the great seal of the Republic glowed against a wall of dark stone. She began speaking without notes. Her voice was quiet at first, but it carried to every corner of human space. 3 days ago, our delegation walked out of peace talks at Vel 9. Some of you have heard stories about what happened there. Some of those stories are true. Let me tell you the rest. She described the negotiations calmly, without anger. She told of Counselor Mole's contempt, of Commander Dren's threats, of Trade Minister Orna's suggestion that humans were fit only for labor. She spoke of the impossible demands and the mockery that followed every attempt at compromise. They called us the bloody children, she said. They laughed at our history. They looked at our delegation and saw servants who did not know their place. President Yunji paused, letting the silence stretch. When she continued, her voice had changed. Harder now, colder. This is not the first insult we have suffered. For 60 years, humanity has been part of the Galactic Union. For 60 years, we have been patient. We have followed their laws. We have paid their tariffs. We have accepted their restrictions. Her eyes found the camera. And what has it brought us? The Gyran massacre. 3,000 dead while Union ships watched and did nothing. The Riven Station incident. 47 civilians killed for crossing an invisible line in space. Dozens of other crimes, other insults, other injuries that we buried in the name of peace. She shook her head slowly. No more. The words hung in the air. Across human space, people leaned closer to their screens. Something historic was happening. They could feel it in their bones. As of this moment, the United Terran Republic formally withdraws from the Galactic Union. We reject their authority over our worlds. We reject their jurisdiction over our people. We reject their vision of a galaxy where humanity exists only to serve the ambitions of others. President Yunji's voice rose, filling the great chamber with iron and fire. And to those who have threatened our people, stolen our worlds, and laughed at our suffering, I have one final message. The United Terran Republic declares war on the Verith Dominion, the Select Consortium, and the Tolos Empire. From this moment forward, we are at war. And we will not stop until every species in the galaxy understands that humanity will never kneel. The Parliament erupted. Humans cheered, wept, embraced each other. On colony worlds, people poured into the streets. On warships, crews stood at attention while the declaration played through every speaker. Something had shifted in the human spirit. The fear that had held them back for 60 years was gone, replaced by something older and more powerful. Defiance. On the bridge of the flagship Haniel's Wrath. Admiral Park Do-yoon watched the broadcast in silence. The ship was already moving toward the border. His fleet had grown from 3 ships to 30, with more joining every hour as the Republic mobilized for war. Captain Han Minji stood beside him. She was young for her rank, only 32, but she had a mind for tactics that Park had never seen matched. She had spent years studying alien battle strategies, learning their patterns, finding their weaknesses. Now all that knowledge would be put to use. The galaxy is watching, she said quietly. Every species with a communications network is receiving our declaration. They think we have gone mad. Park nodded. Good. Let them think that. Madmen are unpredictable. Minji pulled up a holographic display of the border regions. Red dots marked alien fleets. Blue dots marked human forces. There were far more red dots than blue. The Verith have 200 ships within striking distance of our colonies. The Tolos are mobilizing their main fleet. The Select are calling in debts from half the galaxy, trying to organize an economic blockade. She studied the display with clinical precision. By every measure, we are outnumbered and outgunned. This should be impossible. Should be, Park agreed. But it will not be. Do you know why? Minji looked at him curiously. Because they have never fought anyone like us. For 10,000 years, they have waged war against species like themselves. Patient species. Careful species. Species that fight for territory, or resources, or honor. Park's eyes were distant, seeing something beyond the stars. They have never fought a specie that fights for survival. They have never faced an enemy who has nothing left to lose. The communications officer interrupted them. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from Earth Command. Code Priority 1. Lee Taiho's face appeared on screen. He was in the war room, surrounded by tactical displays, and hurrying officers. Despite the chaos around him, his expression was calm. "Admiral Park, the President has authorized Operation Iron Dawn. You are to proceed to the Verith supply depot at Corinth Station and destroy it. This will be the first strike of the war." Park straightened. "Understood. What are my rules of engagement?" Taiho's eyes met his through the screen. "No rules, Admiral. Do whatever is necessary. The Union wanted to teach us about consequences. It is time we returned the lesson." The transmission ended. Park turned to face his bridge crew. Every face was turned toward him, waiting. He saw fear in some of them, determination in others. But in all of them, he saw something else: trust. "Set course for Corinth Station," he said. "All hands to battle stations. We jump in 1 hour." As the crew moved to obey, Minji stepped closer to him. Her voice was low, meant only for his ears. "Corinth Station has a garrison of 50 ships. We have 30. Even if we win, we will take heavy losses." Park nodded slowly. "I know. This is not about winning a battle, Captain. This is about sending a message. The Union believes we will fight defensively. They think we will hide behind our colonies and wait for them to come to us." He smiled grimly. "We will show them how wrong they are." 1 hour later, the human fleet jumped to Corinth Station. They emerged from hyperspace like ghosts, weapons already firing. The alien garrison had expected weeks to prepare for war. They had minutes. Park commanded from the center of the chaos, his voice steady amid the explosions and screaming alarms. He had fought in 3 wars. He had buried friends and led others to their deaths. But he had never felt so alive as he did in that moment. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, Corinth Station was burning debris, and the human fleet had lost only 7 ships. 23 alien vessels drifted dead and spaced out across the galaxy. The news spread like wildfire. Humans had attacked first. Humans had won. The impossible had happened. In his chambers on the Verith homeworld, High Counselor Mole received the report with trembling hands. He read it 3 times before he could accept its truth. The bloody children had drawn first blood, and they were just getting started. 6 months into the war, the galaxy no longer laughed at humanity. The Union had expected quick victory. Their combined fleets outnumbered human forces 10 to 1. Their technology was older and proven through countless conflicts. Their generals had centuries of experience. On paper, the war should have ended in weeks, but war is not fought on paper. Admiral Park Do-yeon understood something that his enemies did not. The Union had grown soft in its long peace. Their commanders followed ancient doctrines. Their admirals expected battles to unfold according to familiar patterns. They fought the way they had always fought because it had always worked before. Humans did not fight that way. Humans fought to win. The first months of the war were chaos. Human fleets appeared where they were not expected, struck hard, and vanished before the Union could respond. Park's strategy was simple but effective. Attack the supply lines. Destroy the support stations. Cripple the enemy's ability to wage war before they could bring their full strength to bear. The Verith Dominion learned this lesson at the Battle of Corinth Station. They learned it again when human raiders destroyed 17 supply convoys in a single week. They learned it a 3rd time when Park's fleet appeared in orbit above their secondary capital, threatened to bomb it into ash, and disappeared before their defense fleet could arrive. The Verith had never faced an enemy who refused to fight by the rules. They did not know how to respond. Captain Han Minji led the assault on Selig Station, the economic heart of the consortium. The station was considered impossible to attack. It sat at the center of a dense asteroid field, surrounded by defense platforms and patrol ships. A frontal assault would be suicide. Minji did not make a frontal assault. For 3 weeks, Her task force hid among the asteroids, watching and waiting. They mapped every patrol route. They identified every weakness in the station's defenses. They learned when the guards changed shifts, when the supply ships arrived, when the commanders grew careless. Then, on a quiet morning when half the garrison was off duty, she struck. Her ships came from 6 directions at once, using the asteroids themselves as weapons. She had spent days quietly nudging massive rocks into new trajectories. When the attack began, those rocks were already falling toward the station. Too many for the defense platforms to stop. In the confusion, Minji's boarding teams hit the station. They moved through the corridors with brutal efficiency, securing critical systems and cornering the defenders. When the station commander refused to surrender, she did not waste time with negotiation. She vented the military sections into space. Every soldier, every guard, every defender who had chosen to fight was suddenly breathing vacuum. The civilian sections were left untouched. When the garrison finally surrendered, Minji transmitted a single message to the consortium homeworld. This is what happens to those who resist. Choose wisely. The economic collapse of the Select Consortium began that day, but the greatest battle of the war was fought at the Riven Nebula, where Commander Dren of the Tolos Empire finally caught the human fleet. Dren had been hunting Park Do-yun for months. He had 400 ships, the largest fleet the Tolos had ever assembled. Park had 120. By every reasonable calculation, the humans should have retreated. They did not retreat. Park had chosen this battlefield deliberately. The Riven Nebula was a graveyard of dead stars, filled with radiation storms and gravitational anomalies. Large fleets could not maneuver effectively in such chaos. Individual ship quality mattered more than numbers. And human ships were very, very good. The battle began at dawn, measured by Earth time. Dren's fleet advanced in perfect formation, confident in their overwhelming strength. Park's fleet scattered, breaking into dozens of small groups that darted through the nebula like wolves hunting in pack. The Tolos had never fought an enemy who did not stand and face them. Their formations were designed for honorable combat, ship against ship, fleet against fleet. They did not know how to handle enemies who attacked from shadows and melted away before they could respond. Park coordinated the chaos from the Bridge of All. Hanul's wrath. His voice was calm, almost peaceful, as he directed his captains through the swirling destruction. He knew every ship in his fleet, every crew, every strength and weakness. He used them like instruments in a symphony of death. Commander Dren's flagship was the last to fall. The great Tolos vessel had fought for 6 hours, its hull scarred by 100 impacts. When human marines finally breached its bridge, they found Dren still standing, refusing to surrender. Park spoke to him through the communication system one final time. You called us primitive, Commander. You said we did not understand war. Dren's voice was thick with pain and rage. You fight without honor. You hide and strike from shadows like cowards. We fight to win, Park replied simply. Your honor lies with your dead. Ours lives with our survivors. That is the difference between us. Dren's last transmission was sent to the Union High Council. 3 words that would echo through history. We were fools. Then his ship's core went critical, and the greatest commander of the Tolos Empire died in a flower of nuclear fire. On Earth, Lee Tai-ho coordinated the war from the Central Command bunker. Every battle, every skirmish, every resource allocation passed through his systems. He worked 18-hour days, sleeping in his chair when exhaustion finally overcame him. When reporters asked him how humanity was winning against impossible odds, his answer was simple. They have had peace for 10,000 years. They forgot what it means to fight for survival. They built empires on the assumption that war was a game with rules. He looked at them with eyes that had seen too many casualty reports. We never forgot. Every generation of humans has known war. It is in our blood, in our bones, in the way we think. They saw this as a lesson to teach us. We see it as existence itself. High Counselor Mole received reports of 3 major defeats in 1 week. The Virith supply network was in ruins. The Selic economy was collapsing. The Tolos fleet had lost half its strength at Riven Nebula. For the first time in his long life, fear crossed his ancient face. He had underestimated the humans. They all had. They had seen primitives, children playing with weapons they did not understand. They had not seen what lay beneath the surface. Humans were not children. They were survivors. They had crawled out of caves and conquered their world. They had split the atom and reached for the stars. They had faced extinction 100 times and always found a way to continue. And now they were coming for the Union.Mole called an emergency session of the High Council. The other delegates were pale, shocked, unable to comprehend how everything had gone so wrong. He looked at them and saw the death of an era. "We must sue for peace," he said, the words like ash in his mouth. "We must end this war before there is nothing left to save." The others nodded silently. There was nothing else to say, that the bloody children had grown up, and the galaxy would never be the S. Human artists had begun to influence alien cultures. Songs from Earth played on stations thousands of light years away. Human stories were being translated into 100 alien languages. Young aliens were copying human fashion, human speech, human ideas. 12 years. That was all it took for humanity to begin changing the galaxy. The Coalition looked at this and became afraid. If humans could do this much in 12 years, what could they do in 100? In 1,000? The answer was obvious. In 1,000 years, humans would not be members of the Coalition. They would be running it. Some species were willing to accept this. They saw potential in humanity. They thought humans could bring new ideas, new energy, new life to an old and tired galaxy. But most species were not willing. They had spent 10,000 years building their civilization. They had rules. They had order. They had peace. Humans threatened all of it. So they voted. In secret, because they knew it was wrong. They voted to destroy humanity before humanity could destroy them. Tejo finished reading Oris's message. He sat in silence for a long time. He was not angry. He understood. If he had been in their position, he might have voted the same way. Humans were dangerous. Even humans knew that humans were dangerous. But understanding did not mean accepting. Tejo was a human. He would fight for his species. He would fight for his planet. He would fight for every child on Earth who deserved a chance to grow up. He called Minister Su Jin. This time, she believed him immediately. They gathered the council in secret. 12 people who controlled Earth's military and government. They sat in a room with no windows and listened as Tejo explained what was coming. 300 warships. That was what the Coalition was sending. 300 of the most advanced vessels in the galaxy, crewed by species that had been fighting wars in space for thousands of years. Earth had 19 ships. The room was silent. Some faces showed fear. Some showed despair. One young officer, Lieutenant Choi Hana, showed something different. She was thinking. "Admiral," she said, "may I speak?" Tejo nodded. Hannah stood up. She was young, barely 30, but her eyes were sharp. "We cannot fight their war. Their ships are better. Their weapons are better. Their experience is greater. If we fight the way they expect us to fight, we lose." "Then what do you suggest?" asked Su-Jin. Hannah smiled. It was a cold smile, the smile of a predator. "We fight our war. The human war. The kind of war no one in this galaxy has ever seen." An older general laughed bitterly. "And what does that mean?" "It means we cheat," said Hana. "It means we lie. It means we use every dirty trick our species has ever invented. It means we remind the galaxy why they were afraid of us in the first place." The room fell silent again. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of people beginning to hope. Teo looked at the young lieutenant. He saw something in her that reminded him of himself 40 years ago. A refusal to accept defeat. A willingness to do whatever it took. "Lieutenant Choi," he said, "I want you on my staff. Starting now." Hannah saluted. "Yes, Admiral?" Su-Jin looked around the room. "So, we are going to war with the entire galaxy. We are outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. Does anyone want to say we should surrender?" No one spoke. Su-Jin nodded. "Good, then let us begin." On Station Meridian, Yuna continued to smile at the aliens who had voted to kill her people. She attended dinners. She made small talk. She pretended everything was normal. But at night, alone in her quarters, she prepared. She gathered information. She learned secrets. She became a spy. The galaxy had voted for war. Humanity was going to make them regret it. Earth did not panic. This surprised no one who truly understood humans. When the news spread through the highest levels of government, there was fear. There was anger. There was a moment when everything seemed hopeless. But then something else happened. Something that had happened countless times throughout human history. People got to work. Admiral Teho activated Protocol Omega. It was a secret plan, created 20 years ago by generals who had never trusted the galaxy. They had asked a simple question: what if everyone turns against us? Then they had spent 2 decades preparing an answer. Hidden shipyards woke up. They were buried deep inside asteroids, invisible to any scanner. For 20 years, workers had been building ships in secret. Not fancy ships. Not pretty ships. Ugly ships. Brutal ships. Ships designed for one purpose: killing. Old vessels were pulled from storage. They had been retired, considered too weak to matter. Now engineers worked day and night to give them new weapons, new armor, new life. Civilian ships received special attention. Mining vessels. Cargo freighters. Transport ships. They were not warships, but they were tough. They were built to survive the dangers of space. Lieutenant Hana supervised this project personally. She saw beauty in these ugly ships. She saw potential. "The Coalition expects warships," she told her team. "They have fought warships for 10,000 years. They know exactly how warships behave. But they have never fought a mining vessel with hidden missile launchers. They have never fought a cargo ship that rams into their engines and refuses to let go." Her team worked harder, but weapons and ships were not enough. Tae-ho knew they needed something more. They needed a strategy that the Coalition had never seen before. He found it in an unexpected place. Professor Yong-Di-Sung was not a soldier. He was a historian. He had spent his life studying human wars, from ancient times to the modern age. He had written books about how humans fought, how they won, how they lost. When Tae-ho asked for advice, Dae-sung said something that changed everything. "The Coalition has shared everything for 10,000 years, he explained. They share technology. They share tactics. They share ideas about how wars should be fought. Every species in the Coalition fights the same way. They line up their ships. They follow rules. They have honor codes." He paused. His eyes were bright with a strange excitement. But humans never shared anything with anyone. Every human war was fought against other humans. We developed tactics to defeat ourselves. We learned tricks to fool our own species. We became experts at fighting the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy: us. Tae-ho understood immediately. They have never faced an enemy who thinks like a human. Exactly. They will expect us to fight like everyone else. When we do not, they will not know what to do. The strategy took shape. It was not a noble strategy. It was not an honorable strategy. It was a human strategy. They would hide. They would lie. They would ambush. They would cheat. They would use every dirty trick that humanity had invented in its long and bloody history, and they would start before the war even began. Captain Beak. Chi-Ho led a covert team deep into Coalition space. His mission was simple: destroy their ability to communicate. Without communication, the Coalition fleet would be blind and deaf. The Coalition's communication system used relay stations scattered across the galaxy. These stations passed messages from one to another faster than light. Destroy enough stations, and the messages would stop flowing. Chi-Ho's team found the first station floating in empty space. It was enormous. It was heavily shielded. It was protected by codes that should have been unbreakable. Engineer Moon Yunbai looked at the codes and smiled. She was small, quiet, and easily overlooked. She was also the best coder on Earth. They think these codes are impossible, she said. They are wrong. She broke through in 6 hours. Velen experts had said it would take decades. They had not counted on human stubbornness. The relay station went dark. Chi-Ho's team moved to the next one. Back on Station Meridian, Yuna played her most important role. She was the face of humanity to the Coalition. Everyone was watching her, so she made sure they saw what she wanted them to see. She acted worried. She let her voice shake a little when she spoke. She asked nervous questions about trade agreements and scientific cooperation. She made it seem like Earth weak, divided and scared. The Coalition delegates smiled at her with pity in their eyes. Poor humans, they thought. They do not know what is coming. They will surrender as soon as they see our fleet. Yuna smiled back. She let them believe it. At night, she sent encrypted messages to Earth, intelligence about fleet movements, details about weapon systems, names of commanders and their weaknesses. Everything she could find. She had become a spy. She was good at it. Perhaps too good. Sometimes she wondered what she was becoming. But then she thought of her family, her friends, her home. She thought of children playing in parks, not knowing that aliens had voted to kill them, and she kept spying. The days passed. The Coalition fleet assembled. 300 ships gathered at a staging point, ready for the final jump to Earth. Their commanders were confident. Their crews were eager. This would be an easy victory, they believed. A quick war against a primitive species. Admiral Torek of the Velen commanded the fleet. He was old and experienced. He had won a dozen wars. But as he looked at his fleet, he felt a strange unease. Something was wrong. Communication with several relay stations had been lost. Supply ships were disappearing. Rumors spread about human raiders, attacking and vanishing like ghosts. AIM. 1 year after the war began, the same hall where humanity had been mocked hosted a very different gathering. The great chamber of Vivai. Val 9 looked smaller now. The crystal table still gleamed under the lights, but it no longer seemed impressive. The high ceilings that had once made visitors feel like insects now felt merely old. Everything had changed, and the architecture of arrogance could not hide it. Admiral Park Do-yoon sat where the alien delegates had once sat. His uniform was new, decorated with medals he had not asked for. His face was tired but calm. The war had aged him, added new lines around his eyes, and more gray to his hair. But there was peace in his expression. The peace of a man who has done what needed to be done. Beside him sat Ambassador Tim Yuna. She had spent the last month negotiating the terms of surrender, working through details that would shape the galaxy for generations to come. Her tablet was full of notes, compromises, clauses that balanced justice with mercy. Even in victory, she sought fairness. President Choi Yoon-ji had traveled personally from Earth to witness this moment. She sat at the center of the human delegation, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes bright with emotion she did not try to hide. Behind her stood Lee Tai-ho and Captain Han Min-ji, representing the military that had made this day possible. On the other side of the table, the alien delegates waited in silence. There were more of them now, representatives from a dozen species who had watched the war from the sidelines, terrified of being drawn into the conflict. They came not to negotiate, but to witness history. High Counselor Mole approached the table slowly. He was ancient, but he seemed older now than he had a year ago. The defeat had broken something inside him. His 4 eyes, once sharp with intelligence and contempt, now held only exhaustion. He carried a single document, the Treaty of Vel 9. Under its terms, the Virith Dominion, the Salic Consortium, and the Tolos Empire would pay full reparations for 60 years of injustice. All human colonies would be returned. All trade restrictions would be lifted. The Galactic Union would be restructured, and humanity would receive a permanent seat on the High Council, with full veto power. The galaxy would not forget what had happened here. That was the point. Mole set the document on the crystal table. His hands trembled as he reached for the stylus. Around the hall, aliens and humans alike held their breath. Before he signed, Mole looked up at President Yoon-ji. His voice was barely a whisper, but in the silent hall, everyone heard it. How? How did you do this? We had everything. Numbers, technology, experience, 1,000 years of victory. He shook his head slowly. How did you defeat us? Yoon-ji studied him for a long moment. This was the being who had called humanity the bloody children, who had laughed at their suffering and dismissed their potential. She could have hated him for it. Perhaps she did. But she answered him honestly, because he deserved to understand. You asked us to be servants, she said quietly. We chose to be conquerors. You taught us that the galaxy respects only power. So we took it. Mole held her gaze for a moment longer, then looked down at the treaty. The stylus moved across the document. His signature glowed briefly as it sealed the agreement. The war was over. Humanity had won. The hall erupted in murmurs. Alien delegates turned to each other, whispering in languages the translation system struggled to process. Some were relieved. Others were terrified. All of them were trying to understand how the galaxy had changed so completely in a single year. Ambassador Yuna stood and addressed the assembly. Her voice was calm and measured, the voice of a diplomat who had finally achieved the peace she had always sought, even if the path had been different than she expected. The United Terran Republic does not seek to rule the galaxy. We seek only what we have always sought, to exist as equals among the stars. The war is over. The killing is done. Now we must build something better. She outlined the new order that would emerge from the treaty. Trade agreements that benefited all species. Mutual defense pacts that would prevent future conflicts. A reformed council where every voice could be heard, not just the ancient powers. It was ambitious, perhaps impossibly so. But Yuna had learned something during the war. Sometimes the impossible was merely the untried dot after the ceremony. Park Do-yeon slipped away from the celebration. He found a quiet observation deck at the edge of the station, where great windows looked out at the stars. He stood there alone, watching the lights of distant worlds. Footsteps approached behind him. He did not need to turn to know who it was. You should be celebrating, Captain Han Min-ji said softly. Park shook his head. There is nothing to celebrate. We won, yes, but victory does not bring back the dead. It does not heal the wounds or erase the memories. Min-ji stood beside him, looking at the same stars. She had fought in a dozen battles over the past year. She had killed more beings than she could count. The weight of it showed in her eyes, a heaviness that would never fully lift. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Park was silent for a long moment. He thought of all the choices that had led to this day. The insults endured, the talks abandoned, the battles fought, the lives lost on both sides. Every death was a universe ended, a story cut short. "I regret that it was necessary," he said finally. "I wish we could have found another way." But the galaxy did not offer us another way. It offered us submission or destruction. We chose neither. A transport ship passed by the window, carrying delegates back to their worlds. In a few days, the station would be empty again. But the echoes of what had happened here would reverberate through history. "Do you think they will ever forgive us?" Minji asked. Park turned to look at her. His eyes were old, filled with the weight of everything he had seen and done. But there was something else there, too. Not hope, exactly. Something harder and more enduring. "No," he said. "They will never forgive us. But they will remember us. And they will never underestimate us again." On Earth, the news of the treaty spread across every city and town. People celebrated in the streets, embracing strangers and weeping with relief. The war that everyone had feared would destroy them had instead transformed them. Humanity was no longer the newcomer, the primitive species tolerated at the edges of civilization. They were a power to be respected and feared. In the Parliament building, President Yunji addressed her people one final time. Her words were broadcast to every human in the galaxy, a message of hope and warning. "Today, we stand at the beginning of a new era. We have proven that humanity cannot be broken. We have shown that we will fight for our place among the stars. But with this victory comes responsibility. We must not become what we defeated. We must build a galaxy where strength serves justice, not tyranny." She paused, her eyes finding the camera. "Let the history of this year be a lesson. Not a lesson in cruelty or conquest, but a lesson in what happens when beings who are capable of peace are pushed too far. We did not start this war, but we finished it, and we will spend the rest of our days making sure it never happens again." High Counselor Mole watched her speech from his chambers on the Virith homeworld. He was alone now, abandoned by allies and scorned by his own people. The defeat had cost him everything. As he listened to the human president speak of peace and responsibility, something stirred in his ancient heart. Not anger, not hatred. Something stranger and more painful. Respect that the bloody children had grown up. And against all odds, they had become something magnificent. On the bridge of Haniel's Wrath, Park Do-yeon prepared for the long journey home. The ship was battle-scarred, but still strong, just like its crew. They had been through hell together and emerged on the other side. Minji stood at her station, running final checks. The rest of the bridge crew moved with quiet efficiency, ready to begin the voyage back to Earth. "Set course for home," Park said softly. The stars stretched into lines as the ship jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, Vel 9 grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among billions. The galaxy had wanted humanity to kneel. Instead, they had learned to bow, and somewhere in the vastness of space, among the countless worlds that now looked at Earth with new eyes, a new chapter of history was beginning. A chapter written not in the blood of conquest, but in the hope of something better. The war was over. The future was uncertain. But for the first time since they had reached the stars, humanity faced that future standing tall. They had earned it.